and I would like to welcome you to the Healing Path. I'm the founder of the Healing Path Conversation Series and Dancing with Ease Body Brain Balance. People hire me to teach them to move out of pain and onto the path of healing. These conversations with friends and colleagues offer many perspectives on healing. The thing we have in common is the concept that healing begins inside ourselves with a decision to heal, and it expands outward from there. I like to say healing happens. It just doesn't always look like we imagine it's going to look. My guest today is Lorraine Stanton from the UK, and I'm so excited to speak with her today about Kintsugi of the heart, or heart Kintsugi. So we'll just jump in and go from there. Good morning.
Hi, good afternoon from me.
Yes, that's it. Afternoon. Isn't the world wonderful that we can share and connect and be over all this distance?
Yeah. It's, you're talking in your opening bit about healing happens and it doesn't always look like it's healing. But I think that the stories of the past few years, which have been so devastating for so many people, have also facilitated connections like this one, but across countries. I mean, I have clients in all parts of the world now, whereas before I used to work in my local community. I'm now not simply national in the UK, but here I am with you in America, and two places at once. It's amazing, so inspiring and delicious.
It is. And then there are all these synchronicities. It's cold here too. And you said it's cold today where you are. I call it ping pong spring. And but I wanted to wear pink. I didn't know why. But it's cold. My pink shirt has short sleeves, I'm going around and I'm like, no, pink is coming to my head. Then we open up the screen and there you are wearing pink. And I'm like, oh, okay, I can listen to my intuition because it's not going to steer me in the wrong direction. Even when I don't know the outcome, and
Or the why.
I tell people all the time, it's how you do what you do, not why so much, or even what. So now I know you wanted to share that tree and that you're freezing because you opened your door.
Well, I absolutely, because we were speaking about heart kintsugi. And I, as you know, use garden metaphors for healing. Nature is so amazing. There are so many inspiring stories and images you can use. Part of the reason I love nature is it takes the ego out of the equation. And the ego is the human navigating vehicle. So I understand we have an ego as human beings. If you didn't have an ego, you wouldn't be a human being. So, that's all part of the story. That's okay. But nature doesn't have an ego. And so therefore, I love using the natural world. And when we were talking about kintsugi, it occurred to me that sure, kintsugi is the gluing together of the broken pieces of pot, and then dusting them with gold and making something that perhaps is more beautiful than it was originally. And I think of that in the human healing journey. But I wanted to introduce you to this tree. This is right in my garden. If it's raining out there at the moment, and I just didn't want to set myself up out there in the rain, too difficult with the technology. But if I was there, you'd be able to see the beauty of this magnificent tree. She's about 150 years old, and she bears the scars of her life. So if you look, there's actually this tree here, that's one whole tree. And then this one is another tree actually in behind. So I'm not talking about that one. I'm talking about this one here. And you can see as you go up, she's actually split right the way down to the ground, all the way up. There's a split. And there's another one here that comes in where this branch is also split off. And you can see where we as humans have done our best to rescue her. We've put bands round and just holding her top trusses together. But this beautiful tree carries all the scars of her life. She's got branches that have fallen off. It's not just the care and the lopping that we have done, but she gets blown in the wind and bits and pieces are broken off her. And of course, you know, over her time, she's actually split. When the wind blows, you can actually see the whole trunk twisting like this. It's quite fascinating. And for me, this is ultimately the story of Kintsugi for the heart. This is not about living from our wounds with the, I'm so wounded, I can't do this because of this wound and this harm and this damage and this trauma. I'm not denying the trauma, but what I'm speaking to is doing what this tree did and just in all its glory, wearing those scars and allowing herself to be her best treeness that she can be. So I love this. It's not gold like it would be with true Kintsugi, but somehow she's bringing her presence through all of those wounds and all those scars.
Well, and all the adventures lived.
Yeah.
This is the thing. When I was really, really little, maybe 5 or 6, I had read a book about a princess somewhere in the Far East, and they had taken such care of her that she had no scars, no skinned knees, no anything. Wow. And I went to the dentist and I had a cavity. And I'm crying and crying, right? Because I'm no longer perfect. And my dad said, think of all the things she didn't do. Yes, she has no skinned knees because she didn't fall off of her bike because she could never ride a bike. And I was like, oh, you know, she didn't get her foot stepped on by a horse because she never got near a horse. And then I think my dad was so wise, and I think that he framed this in a way that I wasn't afraid of the normal accidents and wear and tear that happen from living. And I mean, and if you're going to love somebody, you're going to get your heart broken.
Oh yeah.
You know, and so, okay, do I want to avoid that pain? You know, and then I think of Shakespeare, you know, it's better to have love and lost than never to have loved at all. And then I started thinking, well, yes, and no, and yes, and no.
Sure. It's such a difficult one, isn't it? Because I think we have an ideal that we go through life always in joy, always free of pain, always expanding, always successful and fabulous. And I often share with my clients about, if you imagine a heart monitor, and a heart monitor, when it's monitored up to somebody who's alive and healthy, it does this, right? It's peaks and troughs. And and if it does this, you're flatlining, you're dead. So life is actually this. And the seasons come and go. And even if, in the UK, we are blessed with 4 very distinct and very beautiful seasons. But even in the desert, where it appears to be hot all the time, it's not, because it's hot and it's cold, and then they do get their wet season, and it might only come once every blue moon. But they do have these rhythms. Everything that is alive has a rhythm, and the rhythm is one of ups and downs. When we use those words, we then have a human connection to the ups being good and the downs being bad. And I don't think it's like that. It's simply that wherever we are in life, whether we're on one of the upswings or the downswings, can we be present and be our best glorious self? And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're in full bloom like the roses. It may mean that your best glorious self is this tree that is touching the edge of spring in the UK. And again, if we were close to it, you could see that there are tiny little buds on it, that half the size of my little fingernail, but they are tiny and it's just starting to grow. And if you come back in a couple of weeks, they'll be a little bit bigger. And in another month, she'll be in blossom because she is a pear tree, but she has her rhythm and it doesn't stop her. The fact that she's in the down part of the rhythm at the moment doesn't stop her being her amazing glorious self. And that's the same for us. And I think we forget that sometimes. We kind of think that we have to be in full bloom and full out there all the time. Exhausting.
Very exhausting. And truly, if I don't pay attention to those rhythms in myself, my body gives me a sore throat. So I have to slow down, have a quiet day, drink tea, maybe take a nap, because I wasn't paying attention to the rhythm. And when you were talking about this swoop, I'm thinking, well, ocean waves do that. Yeah. Almost everything goes in that kind of a curve. And we breathe in and we breathe out. I mean, our whole body is set up on that, and we can't really live without both of those. Same thing with your heartbeat. It pumps and it shoots the blood out, and then the blood all comes back. If the blood is only going out, pretty soon, it's all gone. It has to come in. Same thing with air. If you're only breathing in, we think, breathing in is better than breathing out. Well, why? We need both. And so what you said is and what does it mean? Okay, now this is an idea. Maybe you can share with the audience. To be your glorious self in the bottom of the trough. Mm-hmm. Maybe just being present with yourself is glorious enough.
I think that is absolutely the key. I think that when my experience, and in the piece you wrote, you've got some of my background in there, where I definitely had plenty of knocks. I've had plenty of knocks. I still have plenty of knocks. I'm a human being and I live out there fully. And so I get splinters in my fingers and I, cut myself and I fall over and all of those things. And this is where, for me, radical self-compassion comes in. And in a way, this is the gold that goes on the wounds when you stick yourself back together. We're all kind of broken pots in some shape or form. And sometimes we've reclaimed all the pieces and sometimes we haven't reclaimed all the pieces. Sometimes there are wounds and scars we don't want anybody else to see or know about. We kind of keep them hidden. Sometimes there are wounds and scars we don't necessarily know for ourselves. But for me, this thing about compassion for ourselves, it's often easy to be compassionate for ourselves when we're feeling good. But the time when we most need it is when, I don't know if I can say this on TV, but when the shit hits the fan. You know, when it is really, when it's hard, when it is pouring with rain, when the forest is on fire, when the flood is coming through, when the snow has fallen kind of unexpectedly. And we have, those are metaphors from nature, but we have those things. And when we're feeling like that, sometimes the best we can do is to take our next breath. And we need to be compassionate and recognize that taking that next breath is as glorious to the universe as, you know, creating a spectacular garden or doing a fabulous interview or succeeding in a contract at work or whatever your thing might be.
Yes. And to, I think there's a lot of pressure on people growing up on outside measurement instead of inside measurement. And, you know, if I get this trophy or ribbon or something, it proves that I am good. And the thing that I think that upsets this, I mean, I think little children who aren't comparing feel pretty good, kind of natively. Then things happen, and then they start to think, well, if I do this, I'm bad, and if I do that, I'm bad. And by the time we're grown up, we have internalized a whole set of ideas that might not be our own ideas, that might not be true for us. And one of the things that really helped me was to think, oh, this was a pitfall for my mom, and she tried to prevent me from the things that happened to her because of this by preventing my traveling in that direction. Mm-hmm. And I think we do this a lot, innocently. We do it innocently to help other people, failing to understand two things. I'm not her. What happens to me might not be what happened to her because I already am different and I start with a different energy. And maybe I need to step off that curb and fall on my face to learn something. You know, and so then I'm like, oh wow, you know, well, and it's back to that thing I told you. What is the deal between protection and learning, getting hurt, healing? A lot of times in dance, which is my metaphor, mostly my metaphor, is there are people who are incredibly gifted at dancing and they do wonderfully, but until they get hurt and have to rebuild, they don't know how they do what they do. Yeah. It just happens automatically. So a lot of times in my life, an injury was an opportunity to slow down, to reassess, and to choose. And again, the next thing, like, okay, so you figured out it was raining, we had a plan, you were going to be in the garden, and we liked that plan, and it's too cold, and it's too wet. And so you created another thing, another approach. And I love looking at the tree back there. And so I have a pear tree in my yard. and so you wouldn't have thought to do it this way if the weather had been nice.
Yeah, and I think just going back to your thing about kind of what we learn and how we learn, and you know, what we are not often taught is resilience. We're not taught flexibility. We're not taught to think outside the box. And we are often taught the answer to things. I don't know about the education system very well in the US or indeed other parts of the world, but over here in the UK, a lot of teaching from a very early age is all about getting the grade, passing the exam, passing the test, getting the right answer. That means that the school can then say, we've got X number of pupils who have ticked all the boxes, and and all of that. So they actually get the funding and the grading and the popularity. I mean, you know, we can understand why this is happening, but the thing that suffers in that kind of, I call it end gaining, you know, when we're looking at the result-based thinking, is what happens when things fall down? What happens when I am in a trough? Can I look inside myself and go, okay, I've fallen over, I've hurt my knee. What do I need to do? How do I need to adjust? How do I need to course correct? What do I need to do to take care of this tree? What happens? It's pouring with rain down. I really wanted to do that. Do we cancel? And I had a million ideas, and you probably did too. So we've come up with something that works, but it is about thinking. And I mean, I'm often reminded right now about the quote, I think it's from Einstein, the problems of the world will not be resolved by the thinking that created them. I'm misquoting, apologies to Einstein, but that's the kind of idea. So if we are taught only to get the end result, only to understand the answer, all you need to know is the answer. You don't need to know how to get there, and you certainly don't need to know what is off the other side of these other paths. You just need to go down this route. When we're taught like that, and it isn't just schools, you know, there's a lot of it. There's a lot of it in politics. There's a lot of it in cultures. There's a lot of it in many different areas of society. When we're taught just to stick to the path, what happens is we don't have that resilience that gives us, okay, you know, like I was saying, when the wind blows, this tree here, she twists, and she twists like this, which is probably what's created the split that's happened. Now she's supported, so she doesn't twist and part of her actually fall off and she then dies. But in the twisting, that's how she copes when her head is spinning because the wind is going crazy up there. So she's learned a way to deal with things for herself. And that's what we're not taught. That's the casualty for me.
So how do you help people discuss? Because what I'm hearing you say is each person has a way.
Yeah.
And that what it works for you and what works for me, my thing is not necessarily going to work for you. Yours is not necessarily going to work for me. And neither of ours is going to necessarily work for somebody else. And so, well, this is sort of like the garden. Now the garden, you plant all the seeds and you see who comes up. And you have a plan, right? Yeah, I want them to be 4 inches apart, but the best one is 3 inches from this other one. And am I going to leave them? You know, I mean, there's all of these uniquenesses. And I think that, now that what you're talking about that too, this narrow road doesn't always value the uniquenesses.
Yeah.
And so if we get on the narrow road and then we say, well, this piece of me doesn't fit, so I'm sticking it outside the road, and this piece doesn't fit, and this piece doesn't fit. And so suddenly I have 4 or 5 pieces outside the road that don't fit. And maybe they're my most useful pieces to me. And so what I kind of heard you saying in the beginning or read in your bio is that you help people regather these pieces, maybe look at them from a different perspective. And it sounds to me like your work is very individual in terms of how people use it. Maybe the process could be similar.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily about actually reconnecting to those pieces, but it is more about looking at what have we done to block this piece, because that's often the way it works. Is this piece is suddenly defined as being unsuitable or inappropriate. Oh, we don't do that anymore. And so it gets kind of put into a box. And there are things that, we have things that happen to us. One of the things that happened to me, I was bullied as a child. It's not an unfamiliar story for many people, but what I made up about myself, having been bullied or through my years of being bullied, led me to my way of managing it. And I managed it my way, my unique way. Somebody else may have similarities, but there'll be slightly different ways. But what I did do in living within my experience of being bullied was I stopped being my colorful, bright, slightly wacky, and occasionally irreverent self. And I towed the line. And I became very scared if it looked as if I didn't know where I was going, because if I couldn't see where this narrow path was, how did I know I was on it? And if I wasn't on it, I was likely to get myself beaten up. So it's things like that. And what's required in order to reconnect to those pieces is often a courageous look at how we've stopped ourselves being fully ourselves. What are those fears that get in the way? What is it that we have done to disown ourselves? And we haven't done it consciously. And even if we have done it consciously, we've done it to keep ourselves safe and protected, because it hasn't felt safe in the world out there being our full and amazing self. I'm 63. I don't care anymore. I'm kind of done with that. So if you love it, great, come and play. And if you don't love it, go find somebody else. I'm not offended, but I wasn't like that up until relatively recently.
There is a piece of this that I'm not sure that we teach kind of similar things in terms of coming home to yourself.
Sure.
And that's why we get along so well. It's why we have such fun talking. But sometimes I wonder if the things I decided I don't care about anymore, did that come with a certain age? Or was it my lived experience and my reflection on my lived experience, which I decided to do after 57 or something. And I started to look at things and things that I had, even things I had thought were not so cool. I said, wow, I learned something really important from that. And many times the thing that made me so unhappy about something ending, a phase or a thing, was my idea. When I was really young, my husband and I and my brother, we read this book about to get financially independent through real estate, And so we started doing the things. We had all these skills. They could build, they could design. They were really smart. I could organize and everything. And so we started buying rundown properties and building them and renting them and selling them. And we were doing great. And then it all imploded. And I'm like, we did not become financially independent through real estate forever. It was a key piece missing, and I'm like, well, so that happened. That really happened. It just didn't continue to happen. But all the things that made it happen, many of those things also went away. So there is choice, always choice. And healing is a choice.
For sure.
And there's no, and I don't, I think that we are healing all the time, whether we're kind of aware of it or not. I think that's the purpose of life on earth, is to experience things and learn from them. But like you said, with your knee, you have a choice. You hurt your knee. You can go to the doctor and say, fix this. Or you can say, what did I do that hurt it? How did I hurt it? What can I do to take care of it better, to help it heal? You can participate. choice. And for some medical diseases, even, I think that the internal desire to heal makes any medical intervention work better, faster.
Yeah, I think you bring up several really, really good and interesting points here. This thing about, is it my age or is it my experience, that you started that little section with? For me, it's got to be both. But I think that the key piece is about the willingness to take responsibility, to actually look at what is my part in here. And it can be it could be a little tiny part, or it could be a great big part. It's irrelevant. There's no judgment associated with this at all. But if whatever the size of our piece, if we can take 100% responsibility for that piece, then that's one of the keys that for me has made a significant difference to the way I then show up in my life. I am more resourceful knowing that whatever happens, I am able to take responsibility for my part. And I have seen people much older than me who do not understand that. And they may still be teaching and doing amazing stuff, but they don't understand that. And they are not as resourceful, I think. They're stuck on the teaching the right way and the right path. And then there are other people, young people, who are gloriously aware of the level of their responsibility and are willing to step into that wholeheartedly. And even without the life experience that I have, in their youth, they are still fabulous creators and fabulously powerful. And I think that's the key. It is age and it is experience. This, I don't really give a damn what anybody else has to say about things, or what they think about me. That's the bit that comes, yes, with experience, yes, with age, but more that if I know that I can be comfortable with myself, if I can take responsibility for me, for how I am, who I am, what I'm doing, what I'm creating, if you come back at me with a question or a comment and I can stand in my own responsibility, saying, oh yeah, no, that didn't come out quite right, or yeah, no, this is what I mean, and we can listen and share with one another in that way, then that creates a very different relationship and a different place to indeed heal from. Because the healing, particularly in terms of relationship, and this for me is such an important thing in the world, when our world is so challenged by wars and famine and crises and egoic masochistic behaviors in one shape or another. If each of us in our day-to-day life can simply stand in who we are and what we speak, with the ability, when somebody challenges us, to come back and say, well, this is what I believe because of this, and you have a dialogue backwards and forwards, so that there becomes a degree of at least understanding, even if there's not agreement, then I think that's where there's a potential for the world healing. It's not going to happen with the governments, I don't think, but that's a big subject to end on. But that for me is this piece about responsibility. It's about being responsible for my thoughts, my behaviors, my feelings, my actions, and my interactions. That's the key.
Right. And it allows us to be more authentic.
Absolutely.
When we take responsibility for those things, and we don't run up with the so-and-so made me feel. Really? Who let so-and-so in your head?
We just take this back to this beautiful tree here. my husband and I, when we moved to this house 4 years ago, we had her strapped up because we had a tree surgeon come to see her, and there were several people said, just take her down, just take her down. She's she's too old. Take her down. And right up close in her bark, there are bugs, there are beetles, there are woodpeckers, there are wood lice, there are all sorts of creatures. She is home to many creatures. So we want to preserve her and support her as best we can. So we have, as I said to you, strapped her up to just kind of help her stay around for a little bit longer. But here's the thing. If the wind came through tomorrow and took her down, she would be okay with that. That's just nature. That's just the way it is. She's 150 years old. It's her time. There are some saplings in the garden that, the deer have chomped their way through. They didn't make it to 9 months. So, it's just the way nature is. And it's when we allow our ego to run the show. And I'm not criticizing the ego. You can't get rid of the ego. We're humans. We are egoic beings. That's part of who we are. But the trees don't have that ego. Nature doesn't have that ego. And so looking at these things through the eyes of nature, for me, gives me, okay, well, whatever I do, if I can stand in the responsibility for that, if I can be my inner goddess, if I can shine that in a way that that is true for me, that is authentic, like the tree is standing here today, the universe will support me as I've supported the tree with the bands. And as I move forward with that integrity, with that authenticity, then when my time is up, when it is time for me to return to the compost of the earth and the energy of the universe in whatever shape or form that is, then that will be my time. And all I can do between now and then is simply be the best version of myself that I can be, wherever on this cycle of life that I am.
It's beautiful, just beautiful. So I will say thank you so much for sharing your journey and your focus. And if people want to get in touch with you, your social media is in the description and the link is right there. We've been having a lovely talk with Lorraine from Growing with Grace. And I'm Laura Donnelly from dancingwithease.com. And please check back. We do a lot of things here. And Lorraine, this is her second visit, so there is a podcast from her before. And there will probably be more because the garden is always growing. So thank you very much. And we'll talk again soon.
Thank you.